My sister opened my beach house door holding a glass of wine. That was how I found out my parents had changed the locks. 3 days earlier, I had walked out of probate with one clean thing in my hands: the deed to Grandma Helen's beach house on Sandbar Point. Not a promise, not a family understanding, not "we'll sort it out later." A recorded transfer. Her lawyer handed me the certified copy, looked me in the eye, and said, "Your grandmother made this simple on purpose." He was right about the paperwork. He was wrong about the family. When I pulled into the Shell driveway that Friday afternoon, the first thing I saw was my sister's SUV under the palm trees. The second was the brass deadbolt on the front door. New, bright, wrong. Grandma's lock had always been matte black and stuck in humid weather. You had to lift the handle, then turn. This one was clean, polished, and recently installed. My key went in halfway and stopped. I tried once more. Nothing. Then the door opened. Corinne stood there barefoot in Grandma's kitchen, one hip against the frame, stemless wine glass in her hand like she'd been waiting for sunset instead of a confrontation. Behind her, I could see 2 floral suitcases by the staircase, a pink throw over Grandma's wicker chair, and one of Corinne's framed wedding photos already sitting on the hallway console where Grandma used to keep sunscreen and bug spray. She looked me over slowly. Then she smiled. "You made good time." I stared at the lock, then at the wine, then at her. "Why doesn't my key work?" "Dad changed it." She said it like she was telling me the trash had gone out. I stepped closer and looked past her into the house. My house now, and according to the deed folded in my bag, Grandma's house a week earlier, Corinne's stage set by Friday. "What are you doing here?" She took a sip of wine. "Moving in." "No, you're not." "Mom says I am." There it was. Not legal, not moral, just family authority spoken in my mother's voice like it outranked a county seal. My parents came out of the den then, my father first, holding a folder under his arm. He saw my face and gave me the same calm look he used when I was 14 and had caught him lying to a contractor. Not embarrassed, annoyed that I had arrived before he finished shaping the story. "Tessa," he said like I was late to something normal, "don't do this on the porch." "Do what? Notice you changed the locks on my house?" My mother flinched at the word "my." Then she recovered. "How your grandmother knew Corinne needed stability." Corinne was 34, recently divorced, and had burned through 2 rentals in 9 months because she believed deposits were optional and quiet hours were a personal attack. "She needed it more," my mother said. That line landed so cleanly it almost deserved respect for the cruelty. I looked at Corinne. She lifted the glass slightly, not enough to be a toast, just enough to tell me she heard it too and liked how it sounded. "You already have enough," she said. For 5 seconds, I stood there and said nothing. That was the part they didn't expect. My family likes noise. They prepare for tears, accusations, the kind of anger they can point at later and call instability. Silence is harder for them. Silence means I'm not fighting the version of events they prepared, and I'm leaving it intact long enough to bring it somewhere else. So I looked at the lock, the suitcases, the wine, my father's folder. Then I turned around and left. My mother called after me once. My father didn't. He knew enough to be nervous when I got quiet. I drove straight to the marina lot parked facing the water and called the probate attorney. He picked up on the second ring. I was wondering how long it would take. That was not the response I expected. "You knew?" "I knew your parents would test the deed." Not question it, test it. I looked back toward the road. They changed the locks and moved my sister in. He exhaled once, not surprised. "Do you still have the certified copy I gave you?" "Yes." "Good, then listen carefully. The deed is valid. The transfer was recorded before the hearing packet closed. Your parents have no authority over the property. And because your grandmother anticipated pushback, there's an additional instruction in the title file." I sat up straighter. "What instruction?" "A possession notice. If anyone other than you attempts to occupy before title handoff is completed, I can request immediate civil standby to secure entry and inventory. That changed the shape of the evening. They can do that? Yes, he said, and I already drafted it after your mother called this morning asking for a duplicate key authorization in Corinne's name. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because they had moved so fast they had already left fingerprints on the wrong desk. I want it filed, I said. It already is. The next morning at 8:12, someone knocked on the beach house door. It wasn't a neighbor, and it was Deputy Nolan Pike standing on the porch beside a locksmith, holding my certified deed in one hand and a civil standby order in the other. Then he looked past Corinne into the hallway and asked the question that made my mother lose her voice behind her. Who changed the locks on property titled to Tessa Calder? Corinne's face changed first, not fear, annoyance. As if the deputy on the porch was interrupting a weekend she had already started planning in my house. Deputy Nolan Pike did not move. He held the civil standby order in one hand, my certified deed in the other, and looked past her into the foyer where her suitcases still sat under Grandma's mirror. I asked a direct question, he said. My father appeared behind her immediately, already wearing that expression he saves for officials, respectful on the surface, irritated underneath, as if authority is acceptable only when it agrees with him. I changed the locks, he said. This is a family misunderstanding. Deputy Pike glanced at the paper again. Property title says otherwise. My mother stepped in too quickly. Our mother intended the beach house for both girls. No, I said from the driveway. She intended it for one. The county just recorded her vote. That landed, because I was no longer arguing from pain. I was arguing from paper. The locksmith stood beside the porch rail, toolbox at his feet, waiting like a man who had already seen enough family drama to stop taking sides until the document told him where to look. Deputy Pike turned slightly toward me. Ms. Calder, did you authorize any lock change, occupancy, guest access, or possession transfer to the parties inside? No. He looked back at my father. Did you hear that? My father spread his hands. She's being theatrical. Deputy Pike didn't blink. And you're standing in property deeded out of probate 3 days ago. Corinne finally found her voice. Mom told me it was mine. I looked at her. Of course she did. That was the first moment her confidence loosened, because she realized something too late. Being the favored daughter is only comforting, while the story remains verbal. Once the documents arrive, you become just another person holding a wine glass in someone else's doorway. Deputy Pike stepped onto the porch and held out the order. This authorizes civil standby for titled re-entry and peacekeeping, while Ms. Calder secures the property and inventory's visible displacement. If there's a dispute about title, you can raise it through counsel. You do not raise it by changing locks. My father's voice hardened. You can't remove family from a family house. The deputy looked at him, then at the deed. I can stand here while the titled owner changes the locks back. That one hit my mother harder than the order itself, because men like my father still think tone can negotiate with process. Women like my mother know the moment process stops listening. She tried a different angle. At least let us retrieve some personal items. I laughed once. Not loudly, just enough. From the house, you told me I already had enough not to keep? My mother looked away first. The locksmith came up the steps. Deputy Pike shifted aside. Corinne stepped back into the hall, still holding the wine glass, but not like a winner anymore. While the new lock was being drilled out, Deputy Pike asked for identification from everyone present and wrote down names. Then he asked my father a second question, and this one changed the morning. Who requested duplicate access for Corinne Calder yesterday morning through probate counsel contact? My father said nothing. I turned toward him. Duplicate access. So they hadn't just changed the locks. They had already tried to formalize her entry through the probate channel after the deed recorded. Deputy Pike continued. The note in the standby packet says an unauthorized key authorization inquiry was made after title transfer and before possession handoff was completed. My mother said, "We were trying to keep the house occupied." I answered before the deputy could. "No, but you were trying to make my sister harder to remove." He looked at me once, then back to the house. "That's generally how these situations work." That sentence did something important. It took the whole scene out of my family's language and put it into official pattern recognition. Not special, not emotional, not complicated. Just a known move in a known category. The locksmith finished. The deadbolt clicked loose. He stepped back and looked at me. "You want a full replacement?" "Yes." "Good call." He set to work installing it while I stepped inside for the first time. The damage was immediate and precise in the way family invasions always are. My sister's cosmetics were on Grandma's vanity. Her charger cable ran across the kitchen counter. The linen closet had already been rearranged. 2 of Grandma's framed shell sketches were stacked against the wall because Corinne had apparently decided she needed cleaner backgrounds. Deputy Pike stayed near the entry, writing notes. "Ms. Calder," he said, "do you see any major removal of titled furnishings or personal effects?" I looked around. No missing couch, no ripped open cabinets, no truck backed up to the porch yet. Not because they were decent, because they moved too fast and got interrupted too early. "Not major removal," I said, "but they've already displaced items." He nodded once and wrote that down too. Then he asked the question that really mattered. "Where is the title packet your father was carrying yesterday?" My father went still. Again. I had seen that folder under his arm the day before. Dark blue. Thick enough to matter. "I don't know," he said. And the deputy looked at him for a long second. "That answer sounds temporary." My mother said, "Richard." Too late. Because Deputy Pike had already heard the hesitation. He asked the probate attorney's name, the duplicate access timing, and whether any quitclaim, post-probate memorandum, or occupancy affidavit had been prepared after the deed was recorded. My father objected to every question. The deputy didn't care. Then my phone rang. Probate counsel. I answered on speaker. The attorney's voice was calm, clipped, and annoyingly perfect for the moment. "Miss Calder, I wanted to update you before opposing counsel attempts anything stupid. Around 7:30 this morning. Your parents' attorney tried to submit a post-distribution occupancy acknowledgement claiming your sister had been granted permissive residential use prior to final deed handoff." My father closed his eyes. That was how I knew the blue folder mattered. The attorney kept going. It was rejected. The deed is already complete and there is no retained family occupancy right in the file. Deputy Pike took one note, then another. My mother whispered, "This is insane." "No," I said, "this is traceable." Again, that word. Again, it landed. Because the whole morning had stopped being about whether they meant well. Now it was about sequence. They changed the locks, moved Corinne in, requested key authorization, attempted occupancy paperwork, and got caught before the story hardened. Then the probate attorney said the sentence that changed everything one more time. "There is also a restriction note your grandmother filed with the deed transfer package," he said. "If anyone tried to create post-probate occupancy without Tessa's written consent, the title file was to be flagged and preserved." Preserved. There it was. My grandmother again, reaching past death with paperwork and timing. I looked at the walls, the mirror, Corinne's suitcases, the place where my parents thought they had moved fast enough to make me late. They hadn't. And then Deputy Pike asked one final question, quiet enough that everyone in the hall heard it anyway. "Mr. Calder, if the deed was already complete, why were you carrying a second packet yesterday?" My father didn't answer. Because he couldn't. Not while the locksmith handed me 2 new keys. Not while the deputy stood in my doorway. Not while the probate file was clearly still moving behind the scenes. I thought that was the end of the morning. It wasn't. because 10 minutes later, the deputy got a call from dispatch, listened without speaking, and turned toward me with a completely different face. Not routine now, focused. "There's a title records officer asking whether you're on site," he said. "A corrective filing was just attempted this morning against the beach house." I stared at him. "A corrective filing for what?" He looked down at his notepad, then back at my father. "It purports to reduce your deed to a life use grant and transfer remainder interest to your sister." For 1 second, nobody moved. Then my father said, "That's impossible." Deputy Pike didn't answer him. Now he handed me the phone. The title records officer on the line introduced herself as Maris Cole and went straight to the point. "Ms. Calder, a corrective instrument was presented this morning against the Sandbar Point parcel. It was not accepted for recording. We are calling because your name is the current vested grantee, and the filing attempts to alter the legal effect of your deed without court support." I stepped farther into the entry hall. "What exactly did they try to file?" "A corrective affidavit and explanatory memorandum," she said. "It claims the recorded transfer to you was intended only as a lifetime use right, with remainder ownership meant for Corinne Calder." Corinne made a sharp sound behind me. "What?" she said. There it was. Not outrage first, confusion. Because even now, even after the locks and the moving boxes and the duplicate key request and the rejected occupancy filing, my parents were still feeding her a cleaner version than the one they were handing to actual offices. My father tried to speak over all of us. "You can't discuss that without counsel." Maris didn't even pause. "I can discuss a rejected filing with the current title holder when the filing seeks to alter her vested deed." Then she added, in the same level tone, "The rejection is not discretionary. The file was already protected." Protected. That word changed the air again. I asked, "Protected how?" She answered immediately. "Your grandmother attached a title memorandum to the probate transfer package. Any post-distribution attempt by family members to reduce, reinterpret, split, or reassign your vested ownership without your direct signature was to be treated as hostile to intent and preserved in the file." I looked at my father. He didn't look back, because he knew exactly what she was talking about. My grandmother had not just deeded me the house. She had expected the second attack, not the first, the second. The one after the locks, after the move-in, after the story had already been staged. Maris kept talking. "The attempted corrective filing this morning also included a supporting acknowledgement in your name." I closed my eyes once. Of course it did. "Is it mine?" I asked. "No," she said. "Not credibly." Deputy Pike wrote something down the second she said it. Maris continued, "The signature does not match the recorded deed package, and there is no judicial basis to convert a vested fee transfer into life-use occupancy with remainder to another party. We rejected it and placed a preservation hold on all downstream activity." Preservation hold. There was the real damage, not just refusal, history. A visible time-stamped trail of what they had tried. Corinne looked at my mother now, not at me. "You said Grandma gave this to Tessa first because of taxes." My mother actually had the nerve to look injured. "We were trying to keep peace." "No," I said. "You were trying different paperwork until one stuck." That landed, because it was true. Lock change, move in, duplicate key request, occupancy filing, corrective title filing, same theft, new costume every hour. Maris asked one more question. "Ms. Calder, for the record, do you consent to any reduction, correction, no occupancy grant, remainder transfer, or shared interest interpretation of your deed?" "No." "Thank you. That denial is now attached to the parcel." Attached to the parcel. That was for my father, more than me. For men like him, the most frightening thing in the world is not anger. It is a system that starts remembering. When the call ended, the hallway went very quiet. Deputy Pike slid his notebook into his pocket and looked at my father. So this morning you tried the locks, then the key request, then the occupancy paper, then the title correction. My father said, "You're framing this unfairly." The deputy nodded once. "No, I'm framing it in order." That was the whole story right there. In order, not emotion. Sequence. My mother's tears started then. Small, furious ones, not because she was sorry, but because every office they touched had refused to turn family manipulation into paperwork. Corinne looked sick, not devastated, not noble, just sick in the way people get when they realize they were not chosen, only placed. "You told me it was mine," she said again. My father snapped, "Enough!" But Deputy Pike had heard enough too. He stepped aside for the locksmith, who handed me the new keys. Then he looked at Corinne and said, "You'll need to remove your belongings today." My mother flared. "She has nowhere else to go." I looked at her. "That stopped being my emergency when you changed my locks." Nobody argued with that, because for once there were too many witnesses, too many notes, too many filings, too many offices already touched by the lie. The move-out took 4 hours, not dramatic hours, better than that, inventory hours. Suitcases rolled back across tile, garbage bags filled with cosmetics, chargers, beach towels, framed photos, shoes. My grandmother's shell sketches went back on the wall. The pink throw came off the wicker chair. The ring light disappeared from the hall table. Every item removed felt like the house exhaling in reverse. Deputy Pike stayed the whole time. He wrote down visible displacement, noted the changed lock, logged the attempted occupancy, and attached the title officer's contact details to his civil standby report. That mattered later. By the following Tuesday, my attorney had copies of the rejected corrective filing, the rejected occupancy memorandum, the duplicate key request, and the title preservation hold. The beach house parcel carried an internal note barring any further corrective, explanatory, or family-generated transfer instrument without my direct appearance or court order. My parents' attorney stopped using the phrase misunderstanding as soon as Maris Cole's rejection memo arrived. It was too detailed, too chronological, too embarrassing to survive outside a kitchen. Corinne moved into a short-term rental on the inland side of town. My mother stopped saying she needed it more once lawyers began repeating the sentence back to her in deposition prep. My father learned that title files do not respond to confidence, only to authority. As for me, I stayed. The first night after the house was mine again in fact as well as in paper. I sat alone on the back deck with Grandma's old porch blanket over my knees and listened to the ocean push against the dark. The outdoor lights still buzzed faintly before settling. The kitchen window still rattled once when the wind turned east. The hallway board still answered in the same places I remembered from 16 summers of carrying grocery bags in with sand on my ankles. My grandmother had known exactly what they would try. That was the part that stayed with me most. Not that she left me the beach house, that she left me the second defense too. My parents changed the locks on my beach house so my sister could move in because she needed it more. But the next morning, somebody knocked on the door with a deed, an order, and just enough process to pull the whole lie into daylight before it could harden. And once the title file started speaking, nobody in my family could talk over it. If this story pulled you in, tell me in the comments what you would have done in my place. Don't forget to like this video, or subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next video.